The Galactic Conquered had ruled the stars for 12 million years. Their empire stretched across 4,000 worlds, and their member species numbered in the tens of thousands. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a cosmic shore. They had watched stars die and new ones be born. They believed with the certainty of the ancient and the powerful that they understood how the universe worked. They were wrong. High Arbiter sat upon his throne of living crystal on the great council world of his body was long and serpentine, covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. Right now they were a calm blue-green, the color of mild curiosity. Before him floated a holographic image of a small blue planet, third from an unremarkable yellow sun in an unremarkable arm of an unremarkable galaxy. "Tell me again," he said to the observer who knelt before him, "what did you find?" The observer was Ani, a species known for their patience and their perfect memory. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she organized her thoughts. The planet is called Earth by its inhabitants, High Orbiter. The dominant species calls itself humanity. They have existed for approximately 300,000 of their years, though they have only developed technology in the last few thousand. And their development rate, the observer hesitated. This was the part that made her uncomfortable. Unprecedented High Orbiter. They went from chemical rockets to nuclear weapons in less than 50 of their years. They have begun exploring their own star system. At their current rate of advancement, they will develop faster than light travel within the next 2 centuries. Scales flickered to yellow, the color of interest. Fascinating, and their society, their temperament. That is concerning High Arbiter. She waved her hand, and the hologram changed. It showed images that made several council members gasp in horror. Cities burning, soldiers marching, weapons of terrible destruction being deployed against members of the same species. They war among themselves constantly. The observer continued. They have fought thousands of conflicts in their recorded history. They have killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They create weapons not just for defense, but for what they call deterrence, the threat of such terrible destruction that no enemy would dare attack them. Barbaric, whispered one of the council members, a delicate being of crystalline structure. Indeed, agreed. But we have seen barbaric species before. There were warriors once. So were they. We civilized them. We removed the aggression from their genes. We made them peaceful. High Arbiter, the observer said carefully. There is more. The hologram changed again. This time it showed humans in different contexts. Athletes pushing their bodies to breaking point. Scientists working through exhaustion. Soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. Ordinary people running into burning buildings to rescue strangers. They have a capacity for violence unlike anything in our records. The observer said. But they also have an equally strong capacity for what they call sacrifice. They will endure pain, suffering, even death for causes they believe in. They form bonds with each other that override their survival instincts. They feel something they call love with an intensity that our psychologists cannot fully understand. You make them sound almost admirable, said. I make them sound dangerous, High Orbiter. A species this young, this aggressive, this unpredictable. If they reached the stars, they could destabilize everything we have built. The council chamber fell silent. For a long moment, no one spoke, then rose from his throne. His scales shifting to the deep purple of decision. Send an ambassador, he commanded. Give them the choice we give all primitive species. They can submit to genetic modification and join the conquered as peaceful members. Or they can face the consequences of refusal. And if they refuse, high arbiter scales went black, the color of finality, then we do what we have always done. We purge them. The ambassador chosen for the mission was El of the Dominion, of a species known for their diplomatic skills and their complete lack of combat ability. That had been so long ago that they had no memory of ever being anything other than peaceful. El had handled dozens of first contact situations. He was confident that this one would be no different. His ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Earth's solar system. He had expected the humans to be awed by his arrival. After all, this was their first contact with an alien species. They should be terrified or worshipful, or at least impressed. Instead, his communication systems immediately lit up with thousands of signals. The humans had detected his arrival within seconds. They were already trying to talk to him. El was surprised, but he adapted. He broadcast the standard greeting in the mathematical language all intelligent species eventually developed. The humans responded almost immediately, not with mathematical symbols, but with actual words. They had deciphered his communication protocols in less than an hour. This was unusual. He proceeded to Earth, where he was met by a delegation of human leaders. They called their organization the United Nations, a council of representatives from their various tribal groups. El found it primitive but functional. The leader of the delegation was a woman named Secretary General. She was tall for a human with dark skin and graying hair. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and she showed no fear as she looked upon El's alien form. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We have many questions for you." "I have something more important than answers," El replied. "I have an offer, one that will determine the fate of your entire species." He explained the situation as clearly as he could. The Galactic Conquered ruled this region of space. They maintained peace through strict control of all member species. Aggressive tendencies were removed through genetic modification, a simple procedure that would make humanity peaceful, cooperative, and welcome members of galactic civilization. "And if we refuse?" Secretary General asked. Her voice was calm, but El noticed that several of the human guards had tensed. "Then you will be purged," El said. He did not say it cruelly. He was simply stating a fact. The Conquered has done this before. Species that cannot be civilized must be removed for the safety of all others. You have one of your months to make your decision. He expected panic. He expected desperate bargaining. He expected the humans to fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Instead, Secretary General simply nodded. "We will discuss your offer and give you our answer. In the meantime, please enjoy our hospitality." El was confused by their calmness, but he accepted their invitation. He spent the next month on Earth observing humanity up close. What he saw disturbed him more than any intelligence report ever could. He watched humans compete in something they called the Olympics, a planetary ritual where they pushed their bodies to the absolute limit for nothing more than symbolic metal discs. He saw athletes collapse from exhaustion only to rise again and continue. He saw losers embrace winners with genuine joy. He saw the entire species unite in celebration of physical excellence. He watched their entertainment stories filled with violence and conflict, but also with heroism and sacrifice. Their heroes were not the strongest but the ones who refused to give up. Their villains were not monsters, but ordinary people who had lost hope. He read their history and was horrified. They had fought wars that killed millions, developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet, committed atrocities against their own kind, that comprehension. But he also read about people who had stood against evil at the cost of their own lives. He read about soldiers who had died protecting strangers. He read about ordinary citizens who had hidden refugees from genocidal regimes, knowing that discovery meant death. He tried to understand their concept of freedom. The idea that each individual had the right to make their own choices, even bad ones. It was completely alien to the conquered way of thinking, where the collective good always outweighed individual desires. And he watched their children. Human children were wild, uncontrolled, constantly testing boundaries. They fought and cried and laughed and loved with an intensity that El found exhausting just to observe. But he also saw how fiercely their parents protected them. He saw that humans would literally die for their offspring without a moment's hesitation. When the month ended, El returned to the United Nations Assembly to receive humanity's answer. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. Billions more watched through their primitive broadcast technology. Secretary General stood at the podium. Behind her, the flags of every human nation hung in a row, symbols of their divisions, but also of their unity. Ambassador L, she said, we have considered your offer. We have debated it in every language. We have discussed it in every forum, and we have reached a unanimous decision. L leaned forward. Perhaps they had seen reason. Perhaps they understood that resistance was futile. Our answer is no. The chamber erupted, not in panic, but in cheers. Representatives stood and applauded. Outside, El could hear the roar of crowds that had gathered around the building. You don't understand, El said, his voice rising. The conquered has never been defeated. We have purged hundreds of species. You cannot win. Perhaps not. Secretary General agreed. But we will not submit. We will not allow you to change who we are. Our aggression, our passion, our capacity for violence. These are part of what makes us human. So are our love, our creativity, our refusal to give up. You cannot take one without destroying the other. Then you choose extinction. Secretary General smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We choose to fight, and you should know, Ambassador, we're very good at that. El returned to with humanity's answer. The High Council was shocked. No species had ever refused their offer so completely, so defiantly. For a moment there was silence in the great chamber. Then High Orbiter began to laugh. They have spirit, he admitted. I almost admire them, but spirit will not stop the Pgation fleet. Send the order. Let them serve as an example to any other species who might consider defiance. The Pgation fleet was the ultimate expression of conquered power. 10,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. They had not been deployed in full strength for over 1 million years. The last species to face them had been reduced to archaeological curiosities within a decade. Admiral Hex was given command of the operation. He was a species of aquatic origin that had evolved to breathe both water and air. His people had been among the first to join the conquered back when there were only a dozen member species. He had served in the fleet for 3 centuries and had never known defeat. How long until we reach the target system? He asked his navigation officer. 14 standard days, Admiral. The primitives will have no warning of our approach. Excellent. Begin preparing bombardment protocols. I want this to be clean and efficient. No need to waste resources on a species this backward. As the fleet traveled through the darkness between stars, Admiral Hex reviewed the intelligence on humanity. He saw the same images that had horrified the conquered, the wars, the weapons, the violence. But where others saw danger, he saw only primitives who had not yet learned their place in the cosmic order. He did not watch the other images, the ones showing human determination, human ingenuity, human spite. He did not see the recordings of humans who had been tortured for days without breaking. He did not read about the sieges where starving defenders had fought to the last person. He did not learn about the soldiers who had held positions against impossible odds simply because they had been told to hold. If he had, he might have hesitated. If he had known what humanity had been doing during the month of deliberation, he might have turned his fleet around. Because while L had been observing Earth, Earth had been observing L's ship. Human scientists had worked around the clock, analyzing every signal, every emission, every piece of technology they could detect. Human hackers had probed the ambassador's communication systems, looking for weaknesses. Human engineers had begun designing weapons based on principles they barely understood. And human soldiers had begun training for a war unlike any they had ever fought. Secretary General held a secret meeting with the world's military leaders. We have perhaps a year before they return, she said. Maybe less. What can we do in that time? General of the United States spoke first. We can't match their technology. Not yet, but we can prepare. We can hide. We can make them pay for every inch of space they try to take. They expect us to surrender or die. Quickly, added General of Japan. They don't expect resistance. That's their weakness. They've never fought humans before, said General of the African Union, a grim smile on his face. They don't know what we're capable of when we're cornered. Around the world, humanity prepared. Factories that had built cars began building weapons. Scientists who had studied black holes began studying alien shields. Hackers who had stolen corporate secrets began probing alien networks. And deep in the hearts of billions of humans, something ancient stirred. Something that had slept during the long peace between nations. Something that remembered the thrill of the hunt, the rush of battle. The satisfaction of destroying an enemy. The conquered thought they were coming to exterminate pests. They were about to learn that they had awakened something far more dangerous. On the day the Pgation fleet entered the Sol system, humanity was waiting, not with a single fleet, but with something the aliens had never encountered before. A species that had spent its entire existence learning how to fight, how to adapt, and how to win. High Arbiter watching from expected a quick victory and a useful lesson for other primitive species. He would not live to see how wrong he was. Admiral Hex stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and watched the blue planet grow larger on his. It was beautiful, he admitted. A shame it would soon be nothing but ash and memory. Status report, he commanded. All 10,000 ships are in formation. Admiral. Weapons are charged. Shields are at full power. No enemy vessels detected. Hex allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be the easiest purge in conquered history. The humans had no fleet, no space-based defenses, nothing but primitive satellites, and a few research stations on their moon. His officers were actually disappointed that there would be no battle. Move into bombardment position, he ordered. Target there. Major population centers first. I want this finished before their sun sets. The fleet glided forward 10,000 ships moving in perfect formation. They had done this 100 times before on a 100 worlds. The procedure was simple. Destroy the cities, eliminate any resistance, then send in ground forces to hunt down survivors. Within a year, the planet would be empty and ready for recolonization. They were halfway to Earth when the first ship went dark. It was a small cruiser on the outer edge of the formation. One moment it was there, its systems humming with power. The next, every light on the vessel went out. It drifted silently, dead in space. What happened? Hex demanded. Unknown, Admiral. We're reading a complete system failure. No weapons. Fire detected, no impacts. It just stopped. Before anyone could respond. 3 more ships went dark. Then 10, then 50. Across the fleet, chaos erupted. Ships that had never known malfunction suddenly lost power. Navigation systems went haywire. Weapons refused to fire. Shields flickered and died. We're under attack, someone shouted. But from what? Our sensors show nothing. Hex felt something he had not felt in 300 years. Fear. Get me a damage report now. The reports came in. Each one worse than the last. Over 1,000 ships were completely disabled. Another 2,000 were experiencing partial system failures. The remaining vessels were beginning to show similar symptoms. It's in our networks, the chief engineer reported, his voice trembling. Something is in our computer systems. It's spreading from ship to ship through our communication links. We've never seen anything like it. Cut the links. Isolate the infected vessels. We can't, Admiral. The infection is already everywhere. It's like it was designed specifically for our systems. On Earth, in a basement in California, a 19-year-old hacker named leaned back in his chair and grinned. Around him, dozens of other hackers were working frantically at their computers, each one controlling a different part of the attack. Phase 1 complete, announced over the communication channel. We've got about 60% of their fleet. On the other end of the channel, General's voice crackled with tension. How long until they figure out what's happening? They're already figuring it out. But here's the beautiful thing. They can't fix it without shutting down their entire network. And if they do that, they lose coordination. Either way, we win. It had taken humanity 6 months to crack the aliens' computer systems. The ambassador's ship had been of information, broadcasting constantly to its home world. Human hackers had captured every signal, analyzed every protocol, and found something that made them laugh out loud. The conquered technology was old, ancient, in fact. Their computer systems had been designed millions of years ago, and had never been updated. They had never needed updates. No one had ever tried to hack them before, but humans had been hacking each other for centuries. They had developed viruses, worms, Trojan horses, and 1,000 other digital weapons. And now, for the first time, they had an enemy who had never even conceived of such attacks. The virus and his team had created was a masterpiece. It spread through the alien network like a disease, hiding in system files, corrupting navigation data, shutting down weapons, and opening shield generators to feedback loops. Best of all, it was designed to look like a system malfunction, not an attack. The aliens were wasting precious time trying to find a technical problem that didn't exist. Admiral Hex finally realized the truth when a message appeared on every screen in his crippled fleet. It was in the Human language called English, but his translation system still worked well enough to read it. "Welcome to Earth," the message said. "You should have SDA home." Then the real attack began. From the asteroid belt, from behind the moon, from hidden positions throughout the solar system, human ships emerged. They were ugly things, mining vessels and cargo haulers hastily converted into warships. They had no shields, primitive sensors, and crews that had never fought in space before. But they had weapons. The first round struck the eternal judgment before anyone even knew it was coming. A tungsten rod the size of a car, accelerated to 3% of the speed of light, punched through the flagship's hull like a needle through paper. It entered through the port side and exited through the starboard side, leaving a tunnel of devastation in its wake. Admiral Hex was thrown from his feet as the ship shuddered. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights flickered red. What was that? Kinetic impact, Admiral. Some kind of projectile weapon. No energy signature. Kinetic. Hex was confused. The conquered had abandoned kinetic weapons millions of years ago. They were primitive, inelegant, and far less efficient than energy-based systems. Who would use such outdated technology? Another impact rocked the ship, then another. All around him, Hex could see other vessels taking hits. The human weapons were simple, just chunks of metal moving very fast. But they were devastating. Shields were designed to absorb energy, not solid objects. The rounds passed through them like they weren't there. "Return fire." Hex screamed. "Our weapons are offline. Admiral. The computer virus. Then fix them." "We're trying," but a third impact struck the bridge directly. The shattered officers were thrown into the walls. The lights went out, replaced by the dim glow of emergency systems. Hex pulled himself upright and looked around at the chaos. Half his bridge crew was dead or injured. His flagship was crippled. His fleet was in disarray. And the humans were just getting started. Captain Maria Santos commanded the converted mining ship Hope's Fury. It was a terrible name for a warship, but no one had thought to change it. Right now, she didn't care about the name. She cared about the 3 alien cruisers bearing down on her position. "How many shots do we have left?" she asked her weapons officer. "4 rounds, Captain. After that, we're down to the nukes." "Save the nukes. Fire everything we've got at the lead ship." The hummed with power as it prepared to fire. It was a crude weapon by alien standards, just a series of electromagnets accelerating a metal slug, but it worked. The round left the barrel at impossible speed and crossed the distance to the alien cruiser in less than a second. The alien ship tried to maneuver, but it was too slow. The round struck its engine section and kept going, tearing through the reactor and out the other side. The cruiser broke apart in a silent explosion of debris and frozen atmosphere. "Direct hit," the weapons officer shouted. "2 more coming," Santos said. "And we're running out of ammunition. All ships prepare for close combat." Close combat in space was insane. Everyone knew that. Ships were not designed to ram each other. There was no such thing as boarding action in the void. The conquered had never even considered the possibility. But humans had been boarding ships for thousands of years. Ever since the first pirates had swung from one wooden vessel to another. And when they realized they couldn't build enough weapons to defeat the alien fleet conventionally, they had asked a simple question. What if we just take their weapons instead? The Hope's fury accelerated toward the nearest alien ship. Its crew had trained for this moment in simulators, in underwater tanks, in zero-gravity chambers. They had practiced until the procedures were automatic until they could do it in their sleep. The two ships collided with a grinding crash. Magnetic clamps locked them together. Cutting torches began burning through the alien hull. Inside the alien cruiser, the crew panicked. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this. They were a peaceful species. Their aggression bred out centuries ago. They had never learned to fight hand to hand. The humans had never stopped. The boarding party was led by Sergeant, a former Special Forces operator who had spent 20 years training for wars that never came. Now, finally, he had a war worth fighting. He was the first through the breach. The alien corridor was dark. The ship's power was failing. But his helmet display showed him everything he needed to see. 2 aliens ahead, both unarmed, both frozen with terror. Down on the ground, he shouted. Now, they didn't understand his words, but they understood his tone. They dropped to the floor, trembling. Secure them, ordered his team. We're not here to kill. We're here to take this ship. It took 15 minutes to capture the cruiser. Most of the alien crew surrendered without resistance. They had simply never encountered violence directed at them personally before. Their entire species had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten what fear felt like. Now they were learning. By the time the first phase of the battle ended, humanity had lost over 100 ships and thousands of lives. But the alien fleet had lost more than 3,000 vessels, destroyed, disabled, or captured. The Pgatian fleet, which had never known defeat, was reeling. Admiral Hex managed to restore partial power to his flagship. He surveyed the devastation and felt his heart sink. More than a third of his fleet was gone. Another third was badly damaged. The humans were regrouping for another attack. He had to report to the High Arbiter. The communication was patchy, but he managed to establish a connection. High Arbiter, he said, his voice hollow. We have encountered unexpected resistance. His face appeared on screen, his scales flickering with anger. Resistance from primitives. Explain yourself, Admiral. They attacked our computer systems. They used weapons we didn't anticipate. They boarded our ships and captured them. High Arbiter. They fight like nothing I have ever seen. They are primitives. You have 10,000 ships. I had 10,000 ships. I now have fewer than 6,000. And the humans are adapting faster than we can respond. Every tactic we use, they counter. Every weapon we deploy, they find a way around. They are learning. High Arbiter. They are learning how to destroy us. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold. Retreat. Regroup beyond their system. We will send reinforcements. We will return with 20,000 ships if necessary. But this species must be eliminated. As the battered fleet, the humans did not celebrate. They knew this was just the beginning. They had won the first battle, but the war had barely started. Secretary General addressed the world from the United Nations. Behind her, the sky was filled with the debris of battle, burning streaks of light as destroyed ships fell into the atmosphere. Today, we proved something, she said. We proved that humanity will not go quietly into the night. We proved that we will fight for our existence with everything we have. The aliens will return. They will bring more ships, more weapons, more force, and we will be ready for them. In homes and shelters around the world, humans watched her speech. They had lost friends, family, loved ones. But they had also gained something precious, hope. They think we are primitives, continued. They think we are weak. They think we will surrender when faced with superior force. They are wrong. We are humans. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight until we can't fight anymore, and then we find a way to fight some more. She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. They came here expecting to find a species ready for extinction. Instead, they found warriors. They found survivors. They found us. And I promise you this, they will regret the day they declared war on humanity. Far away on the crippled Eternal Judgment, Admiral Hex reviewed the recordings of the battle. He watched humans sacrifice themselves to protect their comrades. He watched them charge into certain death without hesitation. He watched them refuse to retreat even when defeat was inevitable. He had studied warfare for 3 centuries. He had fought dozens of species. He had never seen anything like this. For the first time in his long career, he began to wonder if the conquered had made a terrible mistake. His last transmission before leaving the Sol system was a simple report. They fight like they have nothing to lose because to them losing is not an option. The message reached the High Council on. It was filed away. Dismissed as the excuse of a failed commander. The conquered was too old. Too powerful, too certain of their supremacy to take it seriously. They would learn soon enough. Humanity had tasted victory, and they wanted more. The news of the Pgation fleet defeat spread through the galactic conquered like fire through dry grass. At first, no one believed it. The fleet had never been defeated. It was simply not possible. Then the evidence arrived. Images of burning ships, recordings of human attacks, testimonies from traumatized survivors. The truth could no longer be. A primitive species from an insignificant world had defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy. The High Council met in emergency session. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries sent representatives. Ancient rivalries were forgotten in the face of this unprecedented crisis. Everyone wanted answers. How? Demanded High Arbiter, his scales now a permanent shade of angry red. How did this happen? The answer came from an unexpected source. A small hunched figure stepped forward from the crowd of advisors. Her name was Doctor, who had spent her entire life studying alien species. She was very old and very wise. And she was very, very afraid. I have studied the humans, she said. I have analyzed their biology, their psychology, their history, and I must tell you, honored council, that we have made a terrible error. Explain, commanded. Doctor activated a holographic display. An image of a human appeared, naked, vulnerable, almost laughable compared to the powerful forms of most conquered species. At first glance, humans appear weak, she said. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no venom. Their skin offers no protection. They cannot see in the dark. They cannot hear frequencies outside a narrow range. They are slow compared to many predators and weak compared to many prey animals. Then how did they defeat us? Someone asked. Because everything I just said is irrelevant. Doctor changed the image. Now it showed a human brain highlighted to show its incredible complexity. The Human brain is the most advanced biological computer we have ever encountered. It processes information faster than any other known organic structure. It is capable of creativity, imagination, and abstract thought on a level that most species never achieve. We have intelligent species in the conquered, pointed out. Intelligence alone does not win wars. No, Doctor agreed. But humans combine their intelligence with something else, something unique. She changed the image. Again. This time it showed a human skeleton. Humans are what their scientists call persistence predators. In their evolutionary history, they did not hunt by being faster or stronger than their prey. They hunted by following their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This was already disturbing. Their bodies are designed for endurance. They can travel enormous distances without rest. They can survive injuries that would kill most species. Their wounds heal at an accelerated rate. They can continue functioning even when parts of their body are damaged or destroyed. She showed images of humans who had survived terrible injuries. A man who had lost both legs and still competed in athletic events. A woman who had been burned over half her body and continued to work as a physician. A soldier who had taken multiple projectile wounds and kept fighting until the battle was over. They do not stop. Doctor said even when logic dictates that they should surrender or retreat, they continue. And this is where we encounter the most disturbing aspect of human psychology. The next image showed a word in the human language. The translation software struggled with it for several seconds before giving up. This word is spite. Doctor explained. It has no direct equivalent in any conquered language. The closest translation would be a desire to harm or defeat an enemy even at great cost to oneself, motivated purely by the satisfaction of seeing that enemy suffer. Silence fell over the council chamber. Humans will destroy themselves to destroy their enemies. Doctor continued. They will sacrifice everything they have, everything they love, everything they are simply to ensure that their opponents do not win. This is not logical. This is not rational. But it is very, very human. She changed the image once more. Now the display showed scenes from human history. Soldiers charging into certain death. Cities burning rather than surrendering. Prisoners refusing to break under torture. Civilians fighting tanks with homemade weapons. I have studied their military history extensively. Doctor said, I have found examples of spite throughout their past. At a place called Thermopylae, 300 warriors fought against hundreds of thousands, knowing they would die simply to delay the enemy. At Stalingrad, they fought for every building, every room, every staircase, losing millions of lives rather than surrender one city. They continued attacking a fortified position for over a month, accepting massive casualties because retreat was not considered acceptable. Interrupted. These are impressive stories, but they are still just primitives fighting other primitives. We are the conquered. We have technology they cannot match. With respect, High Arbiter, that is precisely what Admiral Hex believed. And now his fleet is in ruins. Doctor's voice hardened. Let me tell you what I have concluded from my research. Humans are not just aggressive. They are not just persistent. They are adaptable in ways that should be impossible. She pulled up another set of images. These showed humans in various environments, jungles, deserts, frozen wastelands, underwater, in space. They live everywhere on their planet. They have adapted to every climate, every environment, every condition. When faced with a problem, they do not wait for evolution to provide a solution. They create solutions themselves. They build tools. They modify their environment. They change the rules of the game rather than play by the existing rules. And most importantly, Doctor said, they learn. They learn faster than any species we have ever encountered. During the battle in their system, they adapted to our tactics within hours. They developed countermeasures to our weapons. In real time. They are not fighting us with their original technology anymore. They are fighting us with our own technology, modified and improved. A murmur of alarm ran through the council. There is one more thing you must understand, Doctor said. I have studied their psychology in depth. I have analyzed their art, their stories, their dreams, and I have found a pattern. That disturbs me greatly. The display showed images of human fiction. Stories. Of war, of survival, of humanity facing impossible odds. In story after story. The pattern was the same. Humanity on the brink of extinction, fighting back against overwhelming force and ultimately winning. They have been imagining this war for centuries. Doctor said they have written thousands of stories about alien invasions. They have spent generations thinking about how they would fight, how they would survive, how they would win. When we attacked them, we did not catch them unprepared. We gave them something they had been dreaming about their entire existence as a species. You're saying they wanted this? Asked. I'm saying they were ready for this. Somewhere in their collective unconscious, they have always known that the universe is dangerous. They have always expected that someday something would come from the stars to destroy them. And they have spent their entire history preparing for that day. Doctor turned off the display. Her voice was quiet but filled with dread. Hi. Arbiter Honored Council. I must give you my professional assessment. If we continue this war, we will lose. Not because humans are more powerful than us. They are not. Not because their technology is superior. It is not. We will lose because they will never stop fighting. They will never surrender. They will continue until one side is completely destroyed. And they would rather be destroyed than defeated. Then we destroy them, said, we send 100,000 ships, 1,000,000 if necessary. We reduce their planet to dust. If we do that, Doctor said, we will not be killing humans. We will be creating martyrs. And humans fight hardest of all. When they are fighting for the memory of the dead. On Earth, humanity was not waiting for the conquered next move. They were preparing. Generals stood in a vast underground complex, watching as teams of engineers studied captured alien technology. In the 6 months since the first battle, they had made remarkable progress. Reports, he ordered. We've cracked their FTL drive. The lead engineer said, it's actually simpler than we expected. The math is complex, but the basic principles are similar to theories we've been developing for decades. Give us another 6 months and we'll have our own working faster than light engines. What about weapons? Their energy weapons are impressive, but they rely too heavily on their shield technology. Since their shields don't work against kinetic weapons, we're focusing on improving our and developing missiles that can penetrate their whole materials. General nodded. And the prisoners in a separate section of the complex. Captured aliens were being held. They were treated well. Humanity had not forgotten its principles, even in war. But they were also being studied, questioned, and evaluated. Most of the prisoners were terrified. They had never experienced violence before, and the shock of capture had left them traumatized. But a few had begun to talk, and what they revealed was invaluable. The conquered is not as unified as they want us to believe, an intelligence officer reported. There are thousands of species in their empire, but most of them didn't join willingly. They were conquered, forced to give up their aggressive traits. Many of them still remember what it was like to be free. You're saying there might be potential allies out there. I'm saying that if we can reach them, if we can show them that the conquered can be defeated, we might spark something. Rebellion, revolution. At the very least, chaos. General smiled. So, we don't just need to defend ourselves. We need to go on the offensive. The plan that emerged was audacious. Humanity would not wait for the next attack. They would build a fleet, travel to alien space, and take the fight to the enemy. But not as conquerors, as liberators. We're going to show the galaxy that there's another way. Secretary General declared the conquered rules through fear. We will offer something they've forgotten. Hope. Across the world, humanity mobilized. Factories that had built consumer goods now built warships. Scientists who had studied peaceful applications of technology now designed weapons. And ordinary people, people who had never considered themselves warriors, volunteered to fight. The recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Young people and old from every nation and every background wanted to serve. They knew the risks. They knew that many of them would not return. They volunteered anyway. When asked why their answers varied, some wanted revenge for friends lost in the first battle. Some wanted to protect their families. Some simply believed that what humanity was doing was right. But one answer was more common than any other because someone has to. It was the same answer gave when she signed up. She was 32 years old, a school teacher from Ayers. She had never held a weapon in her life. She had students she loved, parents who depended on her, a life that was comfortable and happy. But when the aliens came, she had watched her city burn. She had seen her students' faces, terrified and confused. She had decided then that she would do whatever it took to make sure they never felt that fear again. I'm not a soldier, she told the recruitment officer. I'm just a teacher. The officer smiled. That's what most of us are, ma'am. Teachers, doctors, farmers, engineers. We're learning to be soldiers. Because we have to. That's what humans do. We learn. Thought about that for a long time. She thought about her ancestors who had crossed oceans in wooden ships. She thought about the explorers who had mapped unknown continents. She thought about the scientists who had split the atom and reached for the stars. Humanity had always done impossible things. This would just be one more. Doctor had been right about one thing. Humans had been preparing for this war their entire lives. Every story about fighting monsters, every dream about exploring space, every fantasy about heroic battles, all of it had been practice. Humanity had been training itself without even knowing it for the moment when it would need to defend its existence. And now that moment had come. In the conquered council chambers, the debates continued. Some argued for overwhelming force. Some argued for negotiation. Some argued for simply containing humanity in their own system and waiting for them to destroy themselves. But none of them truly understood what they were facing. They thought humanity was just another species, another obstacle to be overcome, another problem to be solved. They could not comprehend a species that would fight to the last individual, that would sacrifice everything for abstract concepts like freedom and honor, that would choose death over submission. They could not comprehend spite. As the conquered debated, humanity built. Ships took shape in orbital factories. Soldiers trained in simulations and in the harsh environments of Mars and the asteroids. Scientists worked around the clock to understand and improve alien technology. And somewhere in a small room in a large building, a historian named Thomas Wright worked on a project of his own. He was compiling a record of everything humanity had ever done, every war, every discovery, every act of courage and sacrifice. He called it the human story. If we lose, he told a colleague, I want there to be a record. I want the universe to know who we were, what we believed, what we were willing to die for. His colleague looked at the mountain of data he had assembled, and if we win, Wright smiled. Then this will be chapter 1, and we'll have a whole universe of chapters still to write. Outside the window, the first of humanity's new warships lifted off, its engines blazing with technology that had been impossible just a year ago. It was called the Unity, and it carried 3,000 volunteers toward an uncertain destiny. Humanity was going to war, not because they wanted to, not because they loved violence, but because they had learned in their long and bloody history that some things were worth fighting for. And freedom was worth everything. The first human fleet to leave the solar system consisted of 200 ships. It was a tiny force compared to the armadas of the conquered, but it represented something unprecedented. Humanity was no longer waiting to be attacked. They were bringing the war to the enemy. Admiral Wei stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolution and watched the stars blur as the ship entered faster than light. Travel. She was 63 years old, a veteran of conflicts on 3 continents, and she had never imagined she would command a space fleet. But life had stopped being predictable the day the aliens arrived. First jump complete, her navigator reported. All ships accounted for. We are now in alien-controlled space. Wei nodded. Send the message. The message was simple. It was broadcast on every frequency in every language the humans had learned from captured aliens, repeated endlessly as the fleet moved deeper into conquered territory. We are humans. We come not as conquerors, but as liberators. If you have been oppressed by the conquered, if you remember what it meant to be free, we offer you a choice. Join us and together we will build a galaxy where no species rules over another. On the conquered of High Arbiter received reports of the human incursion with disbelief. They were supposed to be defending there, waiting in fear for the next attack. Instead, they were advancing. How many ships? He demanded. 200 High Orbiter, a tiny force. Our local fleets can easily. No. Scales flickered with rare uncertainty. Do not underestimate them. Again. Send 1,000 ships to intercept them and increase patrols around all member worlds. If the humans are broadcasting that message, they are hopping for rebellion. Surely no species would be foolish enough to rebel. His advisor said they have been They have been suppressed. 4. Corrected. There is a difference. And the humans seem very good at finding differences. The first world the humans reached was called Prime. It was the same species as Doctor that had been among the earliest conquests of the conquered. So long ago that few remembered their species had ever been anything but peaceful. But some remembered. When the human fleet arrived, they were met not by warships, but by a delegation of elders. The eldest among them was ancient, her scales faded to gray, her eyes dim with age, but her voice was strong. "I am El." She said, "I have waited my entire life for this moment. My grandmother told me stories of the before time when our people were warriors. She said that someday someone would come to remind us who we were. Are you that someone?" Admiral Wei looked at the old alien and saw something familiar in her eyes. It was the same look she had seen in freedom fighters throughout human history, the desperate hope of the oppressed. "We are humans," she said. "We have come to offer you a choice. You can remain part of the conquered, or you can remember what it means to be free." El turned to her people. Thousands of had gathered to watch the meeting, their faces uncertain, afraid. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then El raised her hand and made a gesture. It was ancient, forbidden, almost forgotten, the old sign of defiance from the days before pacification. "We remember," she said, "teach us to fight again." The rebellion spread faster than anyone had predicted. On world after world, species that had been suppressed heard the human message and responded. Some sent ships to join the fleet. Some provided resources and intelligence. Some simply stopped cooperating with conquered authorities. The humans fought wherever they went, not for conquest, but for liberation. They attacked conquered installations and military bases. They freed prisoners. They protected civilian populations. And everywhere they went, they left behind the same message. You are not alone. The conquered responded with increasing brutality. Rebellious worlds were blockaded. Suspected sympathizers were arrested. The High Council authorized measures that had not been used in millions of years. But every act of oppression only strengthened the resistance. Every execution created more martyrs. Every destroyed city only convinced more species that the conquered had to be stopped. On the human side, casualties mounted. The war was not easy. Human ships were destroyed. Human soldiers died on alien worlds far from home. Families received messages that began with the terrible words, "We regret to inform you." But for every human who fell, 10 more volunteered to take their place. The recruitment centers back on Earth could not process volunteers fast enough. Humanity had found a cause worth dying for, and they embraced it with all the passion their species was capable of. Was now Sergeant, leader of an infantry squad in the 3rd Liberation Division. She had fought on 4 worlds, been wounded twice, and lost more friends than she wanted to count. But she had also seen things that made every sacrifice worthwhile. She had seen children who had never known freedom playing in streets that were no longer patrolled by conquered soldiers. She had seen old warriors, their fighting spirit restored after generations of suppression, standing proudly in new uniforms. She had seen species that had been enemies for shaking hands because they had discovered a common cause. "Why do you fight?" a young alien soldier asked her one day. "You could have stayed on your own world. You could have defended your borders and hoped the conquered would leave you alone. Why come here to die? For species you never knew existed?" Thought about the question for a long time. Because when I was a child, I read stories about heroes. People who fought for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it seemed impossible. I wanted to be like them. And now I have the chance. "But you might die," the young alien said. "You probably will die. This war may go on for decades. Then I'll die fighting for something that matters." Smiled. "That's more than most people get. And maybe someday young people from your species will read about this war. They'll read about humans and in a dozen other species who stood Together against tyranny, and they'll want to be like us. The turning point came on a world called Six. It was a small planet, a mining colony home to 40,000 members of a species called the. They were small, gentle creatures known for their skill in extracting rare minerals. They had never been warriors. And they had not joined the rebellion, but they had sheltered humans. When the conquered fleet arrived, they found 300 human soldiers who had been cut off from their main force that could have surrendered them. Instead, they had hidden them in their mines, fed them, cared for their wounded. The conquered commander, Admiral, was furious. He demanded the humans be turned over. They refused. What happened next was broadcast across the galaxy. Admiral ordered his ships to bombard the planet. They had no defenses, no way to fight back. They could only run as fire rained from the sky. 40,000 innocents died in less than an hour. Then the ground forces landed. They rounded up the survivors, humans and alike, and executed them in the central square of the main city. 300 humans, 6,000, shot one by one as cameras recorded everything. Admiral thought he was sending a message. He was, just not the one he intended. The footage reached Earth within days. It was shown on every news channel in every language. For 24 hours. The planet fell silent. There were no speeches, no protests, no debates, just silence. Then the silence ended. Recruitment centers that had been busy became overwhelmed. Factories that had been running at capacity began running triple shifts. Scientists who had been making steady progress began making breakthroughs. And in 1,000 hearts, something cold and terrible was born. Captain Thomas commanded the human fleet that arrived at 6 3 weeks later. What they found made hardened soldiers weep. The cities were ruins. The bodies had been left where they fell. The conquered had wanted the galaxy to see its power. Instead, the galaxy saw its evil. Tracked Admiral across 12 systems. The alien commander thought he was safe. Surrounded by his fleet, protected by layers of defenses. He had underestimated human determination before. He had not learned. The attack came without warning. Human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, already firing. Escort was destroyed in minutes. His flagship was crippled, boarded, captured. They found hiding in his quarters. He begged for mercy. He invoked the rules of civilized warfare. He promised information, cooperation, anything. Captain looked at him with eyes that held no warmth. You showed no mercy to you showed no mercy to our soldiers. The rules of civilized warfare didn't apply to them. What are you going to do? Asked, his voice trembling. We're going to put you on trial. We're going to show the galaxy every piece of evidence, every order you gave, every death you caused, and then we're going to let your own people judge you. Was confused. My people will never convict me. I was following orders. I was doing my duty. Maybe, said, but your people are going to see what duty to the conquered really means. They're going to see the bodies of children. They're going to hear the screams of the innocent, and they're going to ask themselves, is this who we want to be? The trial of Admiral was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions watched as the evidence was presented. They saw the bombardment. They saw the executions. They heard the last words of victims who had done nothing wrong except show kindness to strangers. The conquered tried to suppress the broadcast, but it was too late. Species that had been loyal began to question Officers who had followed orders without thought began to wonder. The foundation that had held the conquered together for 12 million years began to crack. Was convicted by a tribunal of species from across the galaxy, including members of his own kind. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life on the ruins of Six, tending the graves of those he had killed. But the trial was not really about punishment. It was about transformation. After the trial, 17 more species declared their support for the rebellion. Conquered fleets began to mutiny. Officers who had committed atrocities were turned over by their own crews. The war was no longer humans against the conquered. It was everyone who believed in freedom against everyone who believed in tyranny. Was promoted to lieutenant after 6. She was given command of a company, humans and aliens, fighting side by side. They called themselves the Liberators, and they became one of the most decorated units in the war. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore, she told her soldiers. Before a battle, we're fighting for everyone who wants to be free. That's a bigger cause than any of us. It's bigger than any species, and it's worth everything we have to give. The war continued. The conquered still had more ships, more resources, more soldiers. But they no longer had certainty. They no longer believed victory was inevitable. And for a regime that had ruled through absolute confidence in its own supremacy, doubt was fatal. On High Orbiter watched the reports with growing despair. World after world was falling. Fleet after fleet was being destroyed or defecting. The empire he had sworn to protect was crumbling. How did this happen? He asked Doctor, who had been summoned to explain. The old looked at him with something that might have been pity. You conquered the galaxy by removing every species' ability to resist. You bred out their aggression, their passion, their will to fight. And for 12 million years, it worked. No one could challenge you because no one wanted to challenge you. Then the humans came, then the humans came, Doctor agreed. And they reminded everyone what it felt like to have something worth fighting for. They brought back the fire you had spent trying to extinguish, and now it's burning out of control. Can it be stopped? Doctor shook her head. The humans have a saying. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle. The hope they've spread cannot be taken back. Even if you destroyed Earth tomorrow, it would only make them martyrs. The rebellion would continue. The idea would survive. Was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Then we have already lost. Perhaps, Doctor said, or perhaps this is an opportunity. The conquered has ruled through fear for 12 million years. Maybe it's time to try something else. What do you suggest? Talk to them. Not as conquerors, not as enemies, as equals. The humans don't want to rule the galaxy. They just want to be free. Find a way to give them what they want without destroying everything we've built. Ships died in silence, their crews giving their lives for causes they believed in. Admiral Wei stood on the bridge of the Resolution and watched the chaos unfold. The tactical display showed the positions of every ship in the battle. Thousands of points of light, some friendly, some hostile, all moving in a deadly dance. Status report, she commanded. We've broken through their outer defenses, her tactical officer reported. But they're falling back to protect the palace complex. Our ground forces are preparing to land. Casualties. The officer hesitated. Heavy Admiral. We've lost about 30% of the fleet, but we're winning. Winning. Such a simple word for such a complicated truth. They were winning the battle, but the war had cost more lives than we wanted to count. Human lives. Alien lives. Lives that would never see the peace they were fighting to create. Order the landing craft to launch, she said. It's time to end this. On the ground, Lieutenant checked her weapon for the 10th time. Around her, 300 soldiers, human and alien, waited in the cramped transport ship. They were about to drop into the heart of the conquered power. Nervous? Asked a young who had joined her unit 6 months ago. He had been a student before the war, studying mathematics. Now he was a soldier. Always admitted. Only fools aren't nervous before a fight. Then I must be a fool, El said with what passed for a smile among his species. I'm not nervous. At all. I'm excited. Why? Because we're about to change the galaxy. Whatever happens today, things will never be the same, and I get to be part of it. He paused. Is that strange? Shook her head. No, that's exactly how I felt the first time I went into battle. Hold on to that feeling. It'll keep you alive. The transport shuddered as it entered the atmosphere. Warning lights flashed. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. 30 seconds to landing. Expect resistance. Stood and addressed her soldiers. You know why we're here. The conquered leaders are in that palace. If we take them, the war ends. If we fail, it goes on. So, we're not going to fail. A chorus of agreement answered her. Growls and clicks and human words all mixed together. A symphony of defiance. For freedom, for freedom, they shouted back. The transport hit the ground hard. The doors flew open. Was the first one out, her boots hitting the polished stone of a plaza. Ahead of her, the palace rose like a mountain of crystal and light, beautiful and terrible. And between her and the palace, 1,000 conquered soldiers waited. The battle was brutal. The conquered final defenders were the most elite troops in the galaxy. Soldiers who had been kept as weapons for exactly this kind of emergency. They were fast, strong, and utterly loyal. But they had never fought humans. Unit pushed forward through streets that ran with blood. They took cover behind fallen statues and burned out vehicles. They fought through buildings and over bridges. Every meter was paid for in lives. El fell halfway to the palace, cut down by an energy blast that took him before he even knew it was coming. Saw him fall and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not grief. There was no time for grief, just determination. She kept fighting. By the time they reached the palace gates, her unit was down to 100 soldiers. The gates were massive, designed to withstand any assault. Behind them, the surviving high orbiters waited, certain that the humans would never break through. They were wrong. Called in an orbital strike. A single kinetic round precisely targeted. Turned the gates into dust. The explosion threw her to the ground, but she was up again in seconds, leading the charge through the breach. Inside the palace, the fighting was close and vicious. The corridors were too narrow for military tactics. It was just chaos, violence, survival, lost count of how many enemies she killed. She stopped thinking about anything except the next moment, the next shot, the next step forward. And then they reached the throne room. High Arbiter sat upon his crystal throne, surrounded by the last of his guards. His scales were gray now. The color of defeat. He watched the humans enter and knew that his empire was finished. Admiral Wei sends her. Regards, said, she suggests you surrender. Laughed bitterly. Surrender after 12 million years, after everything we built, he gestured at the windows where the burning sky still flickered with distant explosions. This is what you have brought us. Chaos, destruction, the end of order. We brought you freedom, replied. What you do with it is up to you. Before it could respond, an alarm began to wail. The lights flickered. A new voice spoke through the palace's communication system. A voice that made scales turn white with terror. Omega. Protocol activated. Planet killer weapon armed. Detonation in 30 minutes. His blood ran cold. What is that? His voice was hollow. The final option. If the conquered fell, we were never to let our enemies inherit what we built. The weapon will destroy this world and everything in orbit. Your fleet, your soldiers, your victory. Where is it? How do we stop it? You can't. It's automated. Once activated, nothing can prevent. Grabbed him by the throat. Where the central tower, but it shielded. You'll never. She threw him aside and was already running. Her remaining soldiers followed without question. They knew, as she did, that they had less than 30 minutes to save everyone they cared about. The central tower was the highest point of the palace, a spire of crystal that glowed with inner light, led her team up staircases and through corridors, fighting past defenders who threw themselves in her path with desperate fury. They reached the tower's base with 12 minutes left. The entrance was sealed with a shield that resisted every weapon. They tried energy blasts, explosives, even the cutting torches designed for breaching alien hulls. Nothing worked. We need more time, someone said. We don't have more time, replied. She studied the shield, looking for any weakness. There had to be a way. There was always a way. Then she saw it. The shield generator was visible through the translucent crystal walls. It was on the other side of the barrier, impossible to reach from where they stood. But the crystal itself was not shielded. It was just very, very strong. Looked at her remaining soldiers. There were 23 of them, humans and species whose name she had never learned. They had followed her through hell. I need a volunteer, she said. Someone to fire every weapon we have at that wall simultaneously. The combined heat might weaken the crystal enough for one person to break through. And then what? A soldier asked. Then that person destroys the generator. The shield falls. We stop the weapon. The person who breaks through will be killed. The heat alone. I know. Met each of their eyes in turn. That's why I'm asking for a volunteer. 23 hands went up. Felt tears. She didn't know she had left. Okay, she whispered. Okay, then it's my turn. I'm the ranking officer. This is my call. Lieutenant, no arguments. She handed her weapon to the nearest soldier. Make sure this gets back to my family and make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. She walked to the wall. Behind her, her soldiers lined up their weapons. The heat would be incredible. She would have seconds at most to break through and reach the generator. For freedom, she said. For freedom, they answered. The weapons fired. The wall turned white with heat. Felt her skin blister as she threw herself at the weakening crystal. It cracked. It shattered. She fell through into the generator room, rolling across the floor, her uniform smoking, her left arm hanging useless where flying debris had shattered the bone. The generator hummed. In front of her. 5 minutes left on the countdown. She crawled forward. Every movement was agony. Her vision was blurring. She couldn't feel her legs anymore, but she could see the generator's power core, exposed and vulnerable. She reached it. She pulled out the only weapon she had left, a small knife she kept in her boot, a gift from a student. Years ago when she was just a teacher. With her last strength, she drove it into the power core. The explosion threw her across the room. The lights died. The countdown stopped. In orbit, the shield surrounding the planet flickered and vanished. Admiral Wei, who had been preparing to order a desperate evacuation, stared at her tactical display in disbelief. The weapons offline, her officer reported. Someone did it. Someone stopped it. We closed her eyes. Find them. Find whoever did this. They found in the ruins of the generator room. She was barely alive, her body broken in a dozen places. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize her, performing miracles of medicine in a shattered alien tower. She would survive. She would lose her left arm. She would spend months in recovery, but she would live. When she woke 3 days later, Admiral Wei was sitting beside her bed. You saved the fleet, Wei said. You saved the entire operation. The war is over. The conquered has surrendered. Tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. Did we win? We won. Thanks to you. Not me. His voice was weak but clear. Everyone, all of us, every person who fought and died and refused to give up. I just happened to be there at the end. Wei took her remaining hand. History will remember what you did. History can remember whatever it wants. I just want to know one thing. The galaxy, is it going to be better now? I don't know, we admitted. But we have a chance to make it better. That's more than we had before. The surrender ceremony was held in the Great Council chamber of now by battle, but still magnificent. Representatives of 1,000 species gathered to witness the end of an era. High Arbiter, the last of his line, signed the documents that dissolved the conquered's authority. His hands trembled as he wrote. 12 million years of history, ending with a stroke of a pen. Then it was Admiral Wei's turn to speak. The galaxy held its breath. This was the moment when the conquerors revealed their true intentions. This was when humanity would demand tribute. Territory, submission. This was the way it had always been. But humanity had never been like other species. We didn't fight this war for territory. Wei said. We didn't fight for power or revenge or glory. We fought because you gave us no choice. You came to our world and told us to change who we are or die. We chose a third option. We chose to fight. She paused, looking out at the assembled aliens, former enemies, new allies, uncertain observers. And now the fighting is over. So, let me tell you what we want. We want peace. We want every species in this galaxy to have the freedom to determine its own future. We want to build a community of equals where no one rules by force and everyone has a voice. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. This was not the speech they had expected. We're not perfect, Wei continued. We've made mistakes. We've done terrible things in our history, but we've also learned. We've learned that true strength comes not from domination, but from cooperation, not from fear, but from trust. She gestured to the assembled species. Look around you. Humans and 100 others. A year ago, many of you were enemies. Today we've fought side by side. We've bled together. We've lost friends together. And together we've built something new. The old order is gone. The conquereds' rule of fear is finished. What comes next is up to all of us. So here's our proposal, not a demand. A proposal. Let us form a new council. A true council where every species has an equal voice. Let us build a galaxy where no child has to grow up afraid. Where no species has to give up who they are to survive. She smiled. Not the smile of a conqueror, but the smile of a teacher who sees her students finally understand. Let's be neighbors. The translation software struggled with the word. In some languages, there was no equivalent, but the meaning was clear enough. The chamber erupted, not in protest, but in something that sounded almost like hope. The new Galactic Council was established 6 months later. It was imperfect, messy, and sometimes chaotic. Old grudges flared up. New conflicts emerged. Building a lasting peace was harder than fighting a war. But they kept trying. Was offered a seat on the council. She declined. Instead, she went back to Earth, back to heirs, back to teaching. Her classroom was full of children who looked at her with awe, knowing that their teacher had helped save the galaxy. Why did you come back? One of her students asked. You could be famous. You could be powerful. Thought about the question. She thought about the friends she had lost, the battles she had fought, the moment when she had driven a knife into an alien machine and changed the course of history. Because this is where I belong, she said. Fighting was never what I wanted. I just wanted a world where children could learn and grow without fear. Now we have that world. So I'm going to spend the rest of my life protecting it. By teaching. By teaching. She smiled. The most important weapon isn't a gun or a ship. It's knowledge. It's understanding. It's the ability to look at someone different and see a potential friend instead of an enemy. That's what I teach. And that's how we make sure the peace lasts. Centuries passed. The memories of the war faded into history. Then into legend. The galaxy that humans had helped create grew and prospered. New species were welcomed as equals. Old hatreds were slowly healed. But the story of humanity's defiance was never forgotten. In the great archives of the new council, a document was preserved. It was written by a conquered historian, named Doctor in the aftermath of the war. She had died long ago, but her words remained. To any who find this record, the humans are not conquerors. They are not cruel. They will share their food, teach your children, and die for strangers. They have a capacity for kindness and compassion that humbles me. But if you threaten what they love, if you mistake their kindness for weakness, then God help you. Because they won't. They are the species that hunted until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They are the species that fought world wars and survived. They are the species that looked at the stars and refused to believe they were alone. They are humans and they are the best friends you could ever have and the worst enemies you could ever make. Treat them with respect. Learn from them. Work beside them. And never ever forget what they are capable of. The galaxy learned this lesson once. Let us hope it never has to learn it again. On Earth in a small cemetery in Ayers, an old woman lay at rest. Her gravestone was simple, bearing only her name and 2 dates. But visitors often found flowers there left by people she had never met from species she had never known. Lieutenant had wanted to be a hero when she was young. She had become something better, a symbol, a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they had something worth fighting for. Above her grave, the stars shone bright and clear. Somewhere out there, human ships traveled between worlds, carrying merchants and diplomats and tourists. Somewhere out there, children of a dozen species played together, learning that different did not mean dangerous. The galaxy was at peace, not a perfect peace, not an easy peace, but a real one. Built on sacrifice and hope and the stubborn human refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Humanity had answered the conquered ultimatum with a single word, no. And in that word, they had changed everything.